What up YouTube, it's Salia from HustleSZN, and today I want to do a really quick discussion video about not why negative reviews are important, because I think that's been established and I'll link some of the videos down below, but just why negative reviews are so difficult to make and why people are scared of them, why people kind of react the way they do, and how we should all embrace being more tolerant of negative reviews. So I was originally inspired to make this video by a tweet that I saw from Nahid's channel, and then I also remember that Myonna from Myonna Reads had a similar video about negative reviews and why they're important, and she linked a whole bunch of other videos to Caleb's channel, to a few other people that I didn't know, so I don't remember their names. I think it was Peyton Reads, that essentially discussed the same thing. So today I kind of want to talk about why negative reviews aren't as well accepted and why there's a lot of judgment towards the people who make negative reviews. When someone posts a negative review, what's kind of the initial reaction that people have? I think it's usually one of two. One, it's either that they're automatically dismissed because people think that, oh, they're just doing this for the attention, they want to go on a rant and people like drama and they're doing this for the clicks. And then the other reaction is just simply anger, like anger that this person is attacking whatever work it is that the viewer or the individual really likes, and for some reason they take this as a personal attack on themselves, and so the end result really for whoever made this negative review is just a bunch of hate comments. I think because of this and because there's this fear that people aren't necessarily tolerant of negative reviews, a lot of people will downplay their own opinions. So, they might just say, oh, this wasn't for me, as opposed to actually exploring what they didn't like about it or making more concrete points about what about it wasn't all that good. I also think it leads to a lot of people just omitting the works that they've read that they didn't necessarily like. So this whole idea of only saying something if they have something nice to say, as opposed to actually giving their unbiased opinion of everything that they read. I understand that some people don't want to talk about the stuff they don't like, and I'm not saying everybody has to. I'm just saying that as a whole, I think we should be more tolerant of people's views, and if they have a critical opinion, if they have a negative opinion, try to be more open-minded and see why they feel that way. I think a lot of this also stems from the fact that for some reason, liking the book and having a positive opinion of the book is the default. I've noticed that when someone has something good to say, people will welcome it with open arms, but when they have something negative to say, it seems that they're going against the grain, or they're doing it to spark drama, or people think that automatically it's going to cause drama. There's this tension that's associated with it because you're kind of going against the norm. But why are positive reviews the norm? I think some of it stems from just society as a whole, and the same way that the default in society is to be an extrovert, is to be happy all the time, is to always have positive vibes, not be sad. That's actually one of the reasons. Be right back. It's one of the reasons that sadness is my favorite character and that I love Inside Out. Just because the message of it ultimately is that for once it wasn't too much sadness or depression that was messing Riley up, it was just too much joy. Joy trying to control everything and make everything be happy is what fucked up Riley in the end. And so I love that movie for showing that you need a balance of everything. You need a yin to your yang, and you need to have some negative reviews to all the positive reviews. I'm just gonna keep her somewhere. Theoretically, when you watch a review for a book, it should be roughly 50-50 in terms of people who like the book versus people who don't like the book, or the different ratings that it should get. There should be some variation to it just from a statistical point of view. It's less simple than that because most booktubers in general come from similar backgrounds or have similar interests to begin with, so it's going to skew it slightly. But even then, there should be more variation in reviews than there is currently. I think a lot of times people blame the reviewers by saying that they're just not having critical opinions and they're not really sitting down and critically analyzing the book, and they're only doing this as part of escapism, and so they're not really sitting down and thinking about the content. But I think it goes beyond that. I really think that half of it is that the reviewers themselves have this sort of pressure to have a positive review because of the reactions that I was talking about earlier, like how fans will give you hate comments if you don't like a particular piece of work. And so I really think that the first step is really for the viewers and for other members of the community to be more receptive of negative reviews. So I have a couple things that I think we need to work on as a community and as viewers. It's clear to me with the popularity of unpopular opinions that aside from people just wanting drama, there must be something else that they like. They must be lacking these opinions. I feel like it's some sort of catharsis because people come and watch these videos and they're like, finally, somebody who, like me, also hates this work that it seems that everybody else likes. And I think the more that we pretend that we all love something, something, and I'm not saying we all do, but the more that we shame people for speaking up when they don't love something, the more we're gonna cause this like fake illusion that everybody loves everything, and that, you know, all our works are amazing and none of them are ever problematic, and that it's not okay to make mistakes and it's not okay to go back and change your opinions about books. And so I really think that the more transparent we become, the better. And I do really think that right now there is a lack of diverse perspectives on BookTube. And again, I'm not blaming the booktubers out there already. I think a lot of it is backlash from commenters giving negative comments. You got to understand that the majority of booktubers are very self-conscious individuals. You know, it takes a lot for them to put a video out there, and you're putting yourself as a reviewer in a very vulnerable position. And like, yes, we need to all develop a thick skin, but also I think some of it starts with the reviewers. We see this need for positivity in society at a bigger level as well. I mentioned the pressure of always being happy, but also, you know, you think about like people who are really attractive will always have an easier life in that people will like them more. People will attribute positive attributes to them, kind of like the halo effect, where if you see someone good looking, you assume that they're smart, even though they might not be. So how do I think we can all be a bit more tolerant? The first, from the reviewer end, is just to let people have their opinions and to hear them out first. I think just remembering that they're entitled to their opinions, and rather than having a sort of gut, visceral reaction to it, try to see, are their arguments sound? Are they making valid points? Or do you feel like they're basing it also on a sort of gut reaction? And that way, if you do want to bring something up in the comments, you can start a healthy debate as opposed to attacking them personally. So just remove all emotion from it. Try to not use words that bear judgment with them. So, you know what I mean? Like, don't call the reviewer stupid or something like that, but just talk about the points and focus on the actual content or comment that they made and discuss that. Rather than attacking the viewer, attack their arguments. The second thing is just take a second to breathe before you respond, especially if you feel like they attacked you in a way, or if you feel like they didn't like something that you really loved. Take a second to think about why they didn't like this piece of work. There are so many factors that contribute to whether a person enjoys a piece of work, and not all of them are because of problems inherently in the book. So you have to remember that a reviewer might not like a book simply because of the stage in their life that they are at, or because of their background. They just didn't connect to the characters in the book, or maybe they've read 5 other books that have a similar type of plot, and so for them this wasn't really a new concept, or it wasn't all that original, even though for you maybe it was the first time you read something like that and that's why you loved it as much. So I think realizing that so much of what makes us like a book is the circumstance in which we read it, how we're feeling that day. If we've been super stressed out, are we even paying attention to what we're reading? Maybe not. Do we connect with the characters? Like, there's so much more than just was the writing good and were the characters well developed and things like that. So when a reviewer or a YouTuber doesn't like your book or doesn't like something that you like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're saying that it was bad. They could just be saying that it wasn't for them. And if someone doesn't like something that you love, take a second, breathe before you finish scrap. And now let's look at it from the other perspective, which is from the side of the reviewer. I think, again, that it is much harder for you to make a negative review than a positive review. And it goes back to some of the things that I said earlier. Having a positive review is the default. So when you want to gush about a book, you don't even really need to give that much justification. You can just go on and be like, I loved it, I loved it, I loved it, you should read it. And people will accept that. Like, that's enough. You can make vague comments about, you know, the characters are really good, or I love the romance, you guys should all read it, it's amazing, you'll love it, etc. People will accept that. But when you go up there and you say, this book was trash, don't waste your time, don't bother to read it, I hated this book, things like that, automatically people are going to want evidence. I think that in and of itself makes it a lot harder to make a negative review, because you need to have facts, you need to have evidence, you need to show your receipts, you need to do all that, and you need to put in a lot more work to convince people that you're not sitting there making bullshit and that you're not going after attention. Similar to what I said to what the commenters should do, I think it's the same for reviewers. If you read a book and you feel like, wow, I didn't like that, that reaction comes automatically. So you'll know right away that you didn't like a book, but you might not necessarily know why you didn't like a book. So I think it takes a bit of reflection to kind of come back to the story and to think upon it, like, what didn't I like about this? And again, you have to kind of split it up into, was it something about the story and the book and the work itself that I didn't like, or was it something about the way I perceived the book and the way I I consumed it that I didn't like. I think if you can divide those two, it'll show a lot of insight as to why you didn't like the book, and it'll prevent people attacking you for being stupid later. So the first one is just inherently in the book. Like, was it that the writing was bad? Was it that the characters weren't consistent? Was it that the world building just was very lacking? Was it something about the book that you think makes the quality of the actual work go down, and therefore probably the majority of people, regardless of their upbringing or background, would actually think that that's a flaw in the book? Or was it more about the way that you perceived it? So for example, if you don't even like this genre to begin with, that's something worth mentioning. You should talk about how you have that bias going in. Like, this isn't my genre. I know nothing about this genre and I generally hate it. So just my personal taste got in the way here. Also, if like there's a cultural divide between you and whoever that author is or the main character is, again, you should mention that. Be like, you know what, like, I'm not familiar with this culture, and so for me, I had a hard time following some of whatever it was that they did, but I respect that it wasn't actually the book necessarily doing something bad. It was simply that I didn't have all the tools to be able to really appreciate this book. That kind of prevents people later saying like, oh, you're just racist, or oh, you have this bias against somebody, or whatever. One personal example that I noticed for myself was I have never liked Fangirl, and I have always thought that Kath was the most aggravating character ever. Like, ever. And every time I go on YouTube, I'm like, damn, like, people really like her. Like, a lot of people really relate to her and they really like her. And I think at some point I was watching someone's video and they offhandedly mentioned that they liked Kath, or they liked Fangirl, because it depicted anxiety so realistically or so well. And it was that moment that it clicked, and I was like, oh my god. If I had known that Kath had anxiety, I think I would have recognized this, but as I was reading the book, I had no clue. I just thought she was crazy. But I've always, and I know this about myself, like, I've always had difficulty empathizing and understanding anxiety, mainly because I guess I've never had it. No one in my family's ever had it, and I've come from a family of, I think anyone actually who comes from first generation immigrants will know that there's no such thing really as mental health. There's no such thing as anxiety. I mean, people have it, but you kind of push through regardless. Like, there is no excuse. And anytime you try to complain about anything, they will hit you with the, like, did you live through a war? Did you live through a revolution? Did you move to a new country? And blah, 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 blah. And they're so focused always on moving forward and on working that they just don't have time for anxiety or depression or mental illness. And so I kind of grew up a bit with that mentality, and it was so different from the North American attitude of really embracing it and making a tolerant culture of mental health. Now that I've studied and learned about it, I'm open and receptive to it, and I totally understand, and I realize that I have these biases and I just kind of keep them in check. But for me, that was a moment of like, oh my god, that's why I don't like Kath, is because she has anxiety, and I've always been brought up in a way that you completely ignore your anxieties. So for me, she just seemed really ridiculous. But after I found out that that's why, now I'm like, oh, and I can see the value that Fangirl or the character of Kath would have for someone who did have anxiety, or for other people who are reading all these books about people who probably act more like me because they don't have anxiety, and now they get to see themselves represented. So, you know, my opinion shifted based on me realizing that it wasn't inherently that Kath was a bad character, it was that I just didn't understand mental health. Actually, one YouTuber that I think does negative reviews really well is Read with Cindy, because she doesn't even make it sound like a negative review. She's always so good about showing you the pros to the book and who might find it valuable and who could like it and what it's done well versus what it didn't do as well. And she always makes a point of letting you know whether it's her own opinions, like her own way of consuming it, that made her not like the book, as opposed to the book itself actually being bad. And if it is the book itself being ridiculous, she'll also show you that too. So I actually think she does a really good job of doing a negative review without making it feel like she's attacking you or the work. Which I guess is the second point. If you do want to do a negative review, I think it's important to not just focus on the negative. There's no book, probably, there might be a few, that is just completely all around horrible. Like, someone has put in the effort to make this book, so there was some planning that went into it, and there must be certain aspects of it that actually might have been good, either had the potential to be good or were actually very well done. And I think in order to make it seem like you're not going off on a rant, try to balance it out. Like, here are the negatives, here are the goods. I still think the negatives outweigh it, and here's why. But I do recognize and appreciate that these things were well done, or that these people might actually gain something from reading this book. And finally, like I said, for the commenters to not hate on you, the reviewer, I also think that the reviewers should not be hating on the author themselves. Unless the author, has done something like actually disgusting. How the work turned out is not enough always for you to say that, this author is stupid or this or that. Like, this is just one work in time as they're progressing through their journey as a writer. Obviously, if they do something like promote racism or pedophilia or something weird like that, like, obviously please call them out. But if it's just that, they use a lot of tropes or that their writing wasn't good, that doesn't mean that the author was stupid. I would refrain from trying to attack the author. Again, unless maybe like if you're trying to be sassy, mean, funny, then fine. But just know that if you do that route, you're probably going to get more comments because people are probably going to not like that. So I'd just say have a thick skin, but obviously do you. And then I guess my last piece of advice is just to own your opinions and to, like I said, have this thick armor, know that you're going to go out there, and know that everyone's not going to like you, regardless of what you say. Whether you say super positive reviews or whether you do a negative review, either way, someone's going to have something bad to say if they want to. And having haters, in my opinion, is just a sign of your success, so embrace them. If you guys don't speak up and put out your negative reviews despite people giving hate comments or stupid things like that, or reacting dumb or saying you want attention, if you don't do it, we're never going to move forward. So I think it's important to share your opinions, whatever it is you're feeling, because if you're feeling it, someone else is probably feeling it too, and someone out there will appreciate that you took the time to do it. Yeah, I guess that's it for this discussion. I'd love to hear what you guys think about negative reviews, and if any of the other YouTubers watching this, if you have posted a negative review, I would love to hear what sort of feedback you got, whether it was more negative, more positive, people embraced it. I would love to hear, just in general, what your thoughts are on this subject, and maybe we can start a healthy debate down below.